Welcome to History to Snooze By. Tonight, we invite you on a slow journey back in time to an age of quiet customs, rigid expectations, and soft candlelight behind drawn curtains. This is the world of Victorian England, not the grand battles or royal dramas, but the daily lives, gentle habits, and unseen rules that shaped how people lived, loved, and mourned. From morning tea to the final toll of the evening bell, we'll walk slowly through it all. If you enjoy relaxing stories like this one, we kindly ask you to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and leave us a comment with your thoughts or suggestions for future sleep journeys. Every gesture of support helps us bring more peaceful history to your bedside. Now, find a comfortable position. Let your eyes grow heavy and allow yourself to drift into the hush of another time, where the fire crackles softly, the curtains are drawn, and the world moves just a little more slowly. Let's begin. Chapter 1. The House Awakens. The night is slowly fading. A soft gray light begins to slip between the folds of heavy velvet curtains. The house is still, but not for long. Somewhere deep below the bedrooms, far from the warmth of fire or candle, a bell rings. Faint and distant, yet clear. It is the first of many. A signal. A summons. The servants are being called to rise. This is a Victorian home, large, proper, and finely arranged. It stands quiet in a London neighborhood where the fog lingers low and the cobblestones shine with the dew of morning. Inside, everything is still in place from the night before. The silver polished, the books dusted, the rugs beaten, the coal buckets filled. But now, as the new day creeps in, the house begins to stir. In the basement, where no windows let in the sun, the youngest maid pulls on her rough woolen dress. She is barely more than a child, her hands red from scrubbing floors and washing linens. She wraps a shawl around her thin shoulders and moves to light the first fire of the day, not for herself, but for the family upstairs. She works in silence, always silence. A good servant is never heard unless spoken to. This is the rule. In the scullery, another maid pumps water by hand into a heavy tin basin. She fills the kettle and places it over the flame. Steam will rise soon, and with it, the day will truly begin. Upstairs, on the main floor, the drawing room remains untouched. Lace doilies sit atop the polished furniture. Portraits of stern ancestors look down from their ornate frames. The room smells faintly of old tobacco, rosewater, and beeswax. It is a room meant to be seen, not used. Guests will be welcomed here, not with ease, but with formality. Every chair has its place, every cushion its angle. Nothing is left to chance. In the bedroom of the master and mistress of the house, all is calm. Thick drapes block the sun. A porcelain chamber pot rests quietly beneath the bed. There is no indoor plumbing here. Not yet. That will come decades later. Soon, the lady's maid will enter without a word. She will prepare the mistress's garments, layer upon layer of linen, cotton, and whalebone. She will brush her mistress's hair 100 strokes, gently and precisely. But not yet. For now, the house waits. In the nursery down the hall, 2 children sleep in iron-framed beds. The walls are painted with soft colors, and a small wooden rocking horse rests near the fireplace. The fire, of course, is out. The nursemaid will light it again soon. Cold air creeps through the cracks in the windows. The children are wrapped tightly, their breath forming tiny clouds in the morning chill. Outside, a horse-drawn milk cart rattles past. The sound is steady, rhythmic, hooves on stone. A bell rings to announce fresh deliveries. Somewhere nearby, a chimney sweep coughs as he climbs onto a rooftop. His face is black with soot. His fingers are already numb. Back inside the house, the butler adjusts his waistcoat. He has been awake since before the sun. He checks the dining room. The table must be set just so, the silver aligned, the crystal clear, the napkins folded with care. Breakfast must be served at precisely the right moment. The master of the house expects nothing less. The kitchen smells of coal smoke, bread, and boiled oats. A single window lets in a narrow shaft of pale light. The cook hums quietly to herself as she prepares the morning meal. There will be toast, porridge, eggs, and tea. Maybe a slice of ham, if it's a special day. She moves with confidence. This is her domain. In the back of the house, near the servants' staircase, muddy boots sit lined in a neat row. Coats hang on pegs. A mop leans against a bucket. Everything is clean, or being made so. A cat curls near the stove, half asleep. It twitches its ears but does not rise. It knows the rhythm of this place, the noise, the bustle. It watches quietly as the day unfolds. Upstairs, the lady of the house finally stirs. She rings a small brass bell. It is time. The maid enters, eyes lowered. She carries a basin of warm water and a neatly folded towel. She helps her mistress rise, speaking only when asked. Together, they begin the slow ritual of dressing. Stockings, petticoat, corset, bodice, skirt, gloves, shoes, brooch. Every item has its order. Every step, its method. Down the hall, the master of the house sits in a high-backed chair. He reads the morning paper, freshly ironed by the butler to remove the wrinkles and dampness. He frowns at the headlines, talks of strikes, of reform, of unrest. But his face betrays little emotion. He checks his pocket watch. It is time for breakfast. The family gathers in the dining room. The children enter last, eyes wide, hands washed. They sit straight, speak softly, and only when spoken to. Their nursemaid stands nearby, ready to remove them if they forget themselves. Conversation is limited, polite. Topics are carefully chosen. The weather, Cousin Margaret's engagement, a recent letter from abroad. Anything else, illness, politics, scandal, is unfit for the breakfast table. When the meal ends, the plates are cleared in silence. The family disperses. The master retires to his study. The mistress writes letters in the drawing room. The children are sent outdoors for fresh air. The house, for a moment, seems still again, but below the surface, it is never still. Servants scrub floors on their knees. They polish brass until it gleams. They carry coal up narrow staircases. They sew buttons and mend hems. They prepare for lunch before breakfast is fully done. The rhythm is endless. The work unseen. A knock at the door brings a visitor. The maid answers quickly, curtsies, and directs the guest to the parlor. There, the visitor waits, surrounded by stiff furniture and heavy drapery. A grandfather clock ticks softly in the corner. The air smells faintly of lavender and damp wool. The lady of the house enters with grace. She offers tea. Conversation begins. It is a game, polite and coded. Compliments are exchanged. Hints are dropped. News is shared in whispers. Beneath the smiles, everything is carefully measured. Outside, the fog begins to lift. Sunlight filters through the bare branches of trees. A coal delivery arrives with a thud. Black dust spills across the pavement. The driver tips his hat and waits for payment. Inside, the maid sweeps the hallway, her broom bristling across the floorboards. She watches her shadow move with each pass. She is tired already, and the day has barely begun. In the attic, the trunks are checked for moths. Linens are aired. Old gowns are brushed and stored. The past is tucked neatly into corners, hidden from view, but never far away. The house, grand as it may seem, is built on layers of labor, of silence, of strict routine. Every moment of the day is guided by custom. Every gesture has a meaning. It is a world of appearances, of rules, of rules. And so the Victorian day continues. Time passes quietly. The servants prepare the midday meal. The children return from their walk. The fire in the drawing room is stoked. The mistress changes her dress. The master reads in his study. Another bell rings, and so it begins again. Chapter 2: Corsets and Cleanliness. The morning deepens. Sunlight, pale and cold, slips through the high windows of the master bedroom. Below, the streets are already full of life. Carts rolling, boots tapping, dogs barking, smoke rising in thin ribbons from chimney tops. But inside this home, everything remains carefully composed. The air is still. The fire has been stirred and fed. Fresh coals glow beneath a blackened iron grate. A faint scent of soap and starch lingers in the room. It is time to dress. Dressing for a Victorian lady is not a simple task. It is not something done alone, nor something done quickly. It is a quiet ritual, repeated every morning with exactness and grace. The lady sits near the hearth, a soft robe over her shift. Her lady's maid, already neatly groomed in uniform gray, begins by brushing out the hair. 100 strokes. No more, no less. The brush moves slowly, smoothing the long brown strands. Not a word is spoken. The only sound is the gentle rustle of fabric and the faint ticking of the clock. Next comes the corset. The maid lifts it with care, a long, stiff garment of whalebone and heavy cotton, laced tightly from the back. It is not soft. It is not forgiving. It is not meant to be. The lady stands. Her arms rise slightly. She does not brace herself. She is used to this. The maid draws the corset around her waist and begins to tighten the laces, working from the middle, pulling in both directions. The fabric creaks. The bones press close. The waist begins to narrow. Inch by inch, it closes. Breathe in. Hold. Hold tighter. A Victorian lady is expected to maintain a small waist, not by exercise or diet, but by steel and force. The ideal figure is an hourglass, no more than 18 inches around at the middle. Many aim for less. Some faint, some suffer. All are expected to endure. When the corset is secure, the lady sits again, her movements now more restricted. She sips a cup of weak tea. Her cheeks are pale. Her breath comes shallow. This is normal. Next comes the chemise, soft linen, sleeveless, trimmed with lace. Then a petticoat. Then another. Then a crinoline frame, wide and circular, to give shape to the outer skirts. Then another layer, and another. Finally, the dress itself. Dark velvet, trimmed with tiny buttons. High collar. Long sleeves. Modesty is key. No skin is shown below the chin, above the wrist, or above the ankle. Clean gloves are pulled over her hands. A brooch is pinned at the neck. A hat, feathered and pinned with care, completes the look. All of this takes time. It takes skill. It takes help. A woman of status never dresses herself. That is what the maid is for. And still, she is not finished. The face must be prepared. Makeup, in this era, is frowned upon. At least for respectable women. A touch of powder, perhaps, to soften the skin. A bit of rouge, but only if it looks natural. Painted faces are for actresses, for dancers, for women of the night. Yet, beauty is expected. So other tricks are used. Some women bite their lips or pinch their cheeks to create a blush. Some apply a light coating of vinegar or lemon juice to the skin to appear paler. A pale face is a mark of refinement, of not working outdoors, of not being touched by sun. And then there are more dangerous things. Some use drops of belladonna to widen the pupils, making their eyes appear larger, more innocent. Others dab their faces with lotions containing lead or arsenic. These are sold as complexion waters. They promise purity, youth, and brightness. They also cause sores, weakness, and slow poisoning. but the risks are rarely spoken of. A woman's beauty is her currency. To maintain it is a duty. To question the cost is impolite. Elsewhere in the house, a different ritual unfolds. The scullery maid, hands raw from soap, hauls hot water up the stairs. No plumbing exists here. No taps, no drains. Every basin must be filled by hand, every drop heated over flame. Bathing is not daily. Not for most. Once a week, perhaps. Some less. Water is precious. Labor is expensive. The full bath in a heavy metal tub pulled into the bedroom is a luxury. Instead, most clean themselves with a cloth, a sponge bath, a rinse, a dab behind the ears. Just enough to feel fresh, just enough to appear clean. Soap is harsh and scented strongly. It leaves the skin dry, but smelling of lavender or coal tar or rose. Hair is washed once every week or two, using eggs or vinegar or even beer. Under the arms, powders are used to mask odor. There is no deodorant as we know it. There is no expectation of smelling truly fresh. The air is thick with perfume, cologne, and smoke. Men's grooming is simpler, but no less precise. The master of the house sits at his shaving table. A cutthroat razor rests in his hand. There is no electric hum, no disposable blade, just lather, steam, and steel. He scrapes carefully, wiping the blade on a cloth. A nick on the chin is dabbed with alum. A splash of cold water. A sharp aftershave, heavy with musk. His mustache is trimmed. His collar starched. He adjusts his tie in the mirror. Not a hair is out of place. For him, cleanliness is not softness, but control, discipline, order. The body is a machine to be maintained. Children are expected to be neat, but not often bathed. Too much water, it was believed, could weaken them. Instead, their faces are wiped, their hair brushed, their nails checked, their shoes polished. In the poorer parts of the city, hygiene is far worse. Shared washhouses. One towel between 5. No soap, just cold water. Whole families in one room. Disease spreads quickly. Lice, scabies, consumption. Filth is everywhere. But in this home, this proper, clean, middle-class home, appearances are preserved. The laundry is washed by hand, beaten on boards, boiled in vats. Shirts are starched and hung to dry in back gardens or on rooftop lines. The smell of soap drifts into the air, thick and sharp. Still, stains remain. On collars, on cuffs, on skirts dragged through dirty streets. That is why clothes are dark. Black, gray, brown. Easier to conceal what cannot be removed. And yet, white remains the symbol of purity. White gloves, white blouses, white lace, all meant to show the world that the wearer does not soil herself, that she is above such mess. It is all an illusion, but one carefully maintained. The house, too, follows this same belief. Curtains are aired, rugs are beaten, lamps are cleaned of soot. Brass is polished, every surface wiped. Yet the city seeps in, through cracks, through keyholes, through chimney flues. London is dirty. Its smoke, its grime, its filth coat, everything. Still, the home must appear untouched. Cleanliness is next to godliness. This is the teaching. But true cleanliness is impossible. And so, illusion becomes the goal. To be seen as clean, to seem refined, to give the appearance of perfect order, even while the truth lies buried beneath the layers. As the day continues, fresh collars are laid out, gloves are replaced, shoes are wiped. A new hat is chosen for the afternoon call. Another touch of powder, another twist of the corset laces, a straightening of posture, a fixed, polite smile. And out into the world she goes, the Victorian lady, graceful, pale, silent, and tight-laced. The corset pinches at her ribs. Her steps are small. Her breath is short, but she holds her head high. To be a lady is not to be comfortable. It is to endure quietly, to suffer with grace, to shine on the surface, no matter the cost below. And so, the habits of the day continue, strange and silent, unseen, unquestioned, but always in place. Chapter 3: Silent Children. The morning shadows begin to shorten as the sun rises slowly over the rooftops of London. The streets outside the house are alive now. The cries of street vendors echo between buildings, dogs bark in the distance, and a fresh cart of vegetables passes by with clattering wheels and muddy tracks. Inside, the house is still ordered, still quiet, still under control. The children have woken. In the nursery, a room tucked high under the roof or sometimes hidden in a back corridor, the day begins differently than in the rest of the house. It is a world set apart, a place where children are kept not just for sleep and play, but also to be out of sight. The Victorian nursery is not the warm, soft room we might imagine today. It is practical, sparse. A rocking chair, iron-framed beds, a washstand, a fireplace, if one is lucky. The walls are painted in muted colors, dull greens or gentle creams. The furniture is simple and hard. Comfort is not the priority. Order is. The children wake without their parents nearby. A nursemaid or nanny attends to them first. She enters early, carrying a candle or a small oil lamp if the day is still dim. She speaks quietly but firmly. There is no coddling, no kisses on the forehead, no soft stories. The children rise on command. The first task is to wash. Hands, face, and behind the ears. Not a full bath. Just enough to be clean or to appear so. Then come clothes. Stiff, formal clothes. Boys wear short jackets and tightly fastened collars. Girls wear dresses that reach just below the knee with lace trim and stockings that itch. Laces are tied. Buttons are checked. Hair is brushed, firmly. Ribbons, if allowed, are placed just so. Breakfast is taken in the nursery. A small plate of porridge or toast. Weak tea, perhaps, or warm milk. No sweets, no chatter, no demands. Silence is taught early. Obedience is expected without reward. In a proper Victorian household, children are not to be heard. They are not to interrupt. They are not to speak at the table unless invited. They do not join their parents unless summoned. To be well behaved is to be invisible. Love, when offered, is often distant. A nod, a pat on the head, a quiet, very good. The bond between parent and child is not as close as it might be today. Mothers are expected to manage the household, not the nursery. Fathers are often away or working in private studies, speaking only to the children when necessary. Their role is to discipline, not to comfort. Children are shaped, not nurtured. They are corrected, not indulged. And they learn quickly. Some homes follow stricter rules than others. Some allow the children to visit their parents in the drawing room at certain hours, perhaps before bedtime or during afternoon tea. But even then, the time is brief and the behavior must be perfect. A frown, a spill, a single raised voice, and the child is removed. Discipline is not gentle. In many homes, the birch rod hangs in plain view. A symbol, a warning. Corporal punishment is common. A slap to the hand, a belt across the back, a smack with a slipper. These acts are not seen as cruel, but necessary. A way to build character, to form habits, to correct the soul. Children are expected to pray daily, to show gratitude, to sit upright, to read scripture, and to recite moral lessons. Books are not for amusement, but for instruction. Tales of virtue, stories of obedience. Cautionary tales where disobedient children fall ill, are lost, or worse. Yet, despite all of this, children are still children. They still find ways to play. A wooden hoop rolled with a stick in the garden. A doll made of cloth and straw. A small carved horse. Marbles, spinning tops, and picture books with hand-colored drawings. But their play must be quiet, contained. No shouting, no running through the halls, no dirty shoes on the carpets. Even laughter can be frowned upon if it is too loud. In wealthier homes, a governess may arrive mid-morning. She teaches lessons in a small schoolroom: arithmetic, geography, reading, writing, and above all, manners. Girls learn needlework, music, and French. Boys learn Latin, logic, and history, but only if the family can afford it. Education is a privilege, not a right. For working-class children, there is little time for study. Many begin working as soon as they are able. Some carry coal. Some sweep chimneys. Some work in factories, their small fingers able to reach between moving parts where adult hands cannot fit. Others sell matches, shine shoes, or beg. The streets of Victorian cities are full of children, barefoot, hungry, coughing in the soot and smoke. They are scolded, ignored, or feared. They are seen as a nuisance, a problem to be solved, and yet they endure. In some cases, families send their children away to boarding school, to live with relatives, or even to orphanages, not because they are truly orphans, but because they cannot be fed. These institutions are strict, cold, often cruel. Meals are meager. Beds are hard. Punishment is swift. And yet, they offer one thing others cannot: structure. Structure is the lifeblood of the Victorian world. Even in play, there are rules. Tea parties for girls are rehearsals for adulthood, learning to pour, to offer, to receive. For boys, games of toy soldiers or pretend battles are meant to train the mind for duty and discipline. Emotion is not encouraged. To cry is a sign of weakness. To sulk is ungrateful. A good child is cheerful, composed, and obedient at all times. If grief comes, as it often does in an age of illness, the child is expected to bear it with dignity. No weeping in public, no tantrums, just a bowed head, a whispered prayer. Children often wear black when mourning, just like adults. Tiny black dresses, small hats with veils. Mourning is a lesson taught early and repeated often. And yet, within these strict limits, moments of tenderness can still be found. A nursemaid hums a soft tune while buttoning a child's boots. A governess slips a sweet into a palm during a long lesson. A father, once stern and distant, pauses to place a hand on his son's shoulder. These are rare, fleeting moments, but they matter. In the nursery, toys are placed neatly back on the shelf. The fire is fed. The rug is swept. The children sit by the window, looking out at the foggy street below. Their world is small, quiet, controlled, but still full of wonder. Even in silence, the imagination lives. Behind polite smiles, questions form. Behind lowered eyes, thoughts grow. The Victorian child learns to speak softly, to sit still, to wait. But inside, the mind is restless, curious, watching everything. One day, they will grow. They will put on the corset or the top hat. They will walk the same streets as their parents, follow the same rules, repeat the same habits. But for now, they are small figures in a large house, caught in a time of lace and dust, of obedience and cold baths, of whispered songs and strict goodnights. They are children in a world built for adults, and they are learning every day how to belong. Chapter 4: A Woman's Place. Morning has settled into its rhythm. Outside the windows, the sun filters through a gauze of thin clouds, casting a silver wash over rooftops and bare trees. A milk cart rattles down the street, wheels catching on loose stones. The horses snort gently in the cool air. In the distance, a church bell chimes the passing hour. Inside, the household breathes in measured stillness. The drawing room has been prepared. The chairs are set at the proper angle. The fireplace is lit, with flames tucked low beneath the iron grate. A tray of tea has been placed on a side table with practiced care, 2 cups, porcelain white, waiting to be used. The woman of the house sits alone for now. Her eyes rest on the window but do not follow anything in particular. Her dress is tailored neatly, its trim pressed and its buttons fastened high along her collar. A small brooch glints just beneath her throat. Her gloves, freshly cleaned, lie folded in her lap. The room carries a scent of lavender polish and coal smoke, faint and clean. Nothing here is accidental. Each cushion, each vase, each quiet touch of color has been chosen with intention, not by her hand perhaps, but under her direction. This is her domain, not in ownership, but in presence. She does not manage the finances of the estate. She does not write the laws that govern her life, but she is expected to set the tone of the home, to embody grace, steadiness, and refinement. Her manner must be composed, her appearance modest, her voice pleasant, her smile easy and well-timed. These things are not suggestions. They are part of the fabric of womanhood in Victorian England. Her journey began long before this morning. As a girl, she moved through a world defined by watchfulness. Every glance, every gesture, every pause was gently corrected until they became habit. Her speech softened, her laughter tempered, her thoughts guarded. The rules of behavior were rarely shouted aloud, yet always present. At dinner, she observed her mother's subtle nods, her quiet way of addressing a guest, the careful folding of a napkin, the timing of each remark. These small movements taught her far more than any governess could. Her education prepared her for society, but not for self-expression. She studied music, perhaps a little French, the basics of drawing and embroidery. Her mind was capable of more, but capability was not the goal. What mattered was polish, the ability to host a conversation with charm, to walk with elegance, to write a thank you letter that conveyed warmth without enthusiasm. Politeness mattered more than opinion. Composure more than truth. By the time she entered her late teens, her future was no longer a distant thought, but an immediate concern. Her family made introductions, arranged outings, and considered which young men might be suitable. Marriage was not spoken of too loudly, but it hovered in every gesture, every invitation, every new acquaintance. And when the match was made, whether with affection or practicality, her life shifted into its next stage. A wife, no longer a daughter, but still not independent. Legally, her husband now held control over her possessions and, in most cases, over her actions. Her letters could be opened, her opinions set aside. But in return, she gained her own space, a household to shape, a name to carry forward, a place in society to protect. She approached these responsibilities with the same precision that shaped her upbringing. Each day followed a pattern, not rigid, but structured. In the early hours, she consulted with the housekeeper. Menus were reviewed, linens inspected, repairs quietly discussed, the butcher's delivery noted, the garden's condition passed on. Later, she wrote letters, made charitable calls, hosted tea, played piano if requested. She supervised the children's lessons when a governess was unavailable. She listened politely to her husband's remarks at dinner and responded with interest, even when the subject did not stir her thoughts. In social gatherings, she represented the family's stability. Her tone was calm. Her dress, tasteful, but never boastful. She navigated conversation with lightness, carefully stepping around politics or discomfort. If another lady said something unkind, she did not respond with sharpness. She steered the moment back toward civility. It was not submission. It was performance, quiet, constant, unacknowledged. She knew the line between presence and intrusion, between being admired and being noticed too often. Too much wit could be misread. Too much passion misunderstood. A woman had influence, but only if she never appeared to seek it. Her friendships offered small relief from this stillness. In another woman's parlor, over cups of cooling tea, she might speak more freely. They exchanged news, shared observations, and occasionally allowed themselves laughter that rose above the expected register. These were safe spaces, rooms where the world's expectations faded for an hour, and where one could admit to exhaustion without shame. Even so, discretion remained. Every word could echo beyond the door. A careless comment might return through a neighbor, dressed up as gossip. If her husband grew distant, she bore it quietly. If he grew ill-tempered, she made allowances. If he disappeared into his study for hours, she found ways to fill the time by preparing visits, organizing sewing circles, or simply walking the garden paths with a book in her hand and thoughts elsewhere. When children came, her world contracted further. Motherhood brought purpose, but also fear. Birth was dangerous. Illness was common. A fever could sweep through the nursery and leave silence behind. Each day with a child was treasured, not in moments of play, but in careful observation, a cough, a rash, a change in mood. She taught them gentleness, restraint, respect. The boys she prepared for school. The girls she prepared for the same life she lived, with all its customs and quiet trials. She did not speak of her own uncertainties. They would not have been understood, nor were they welcome. Her value was measured not by ideas, but by effect. How well the house ran, how smoothly events passed, how content the family seemed. There were moments she returned to herself. Late in the evening, when the lamps were dimmed and the household rested, she might sit alone near the fire, her hands idle at last, her breath soft. In the quiet, she might recall her first piano lesson, the letter she never sent, the poem she once copied onto folded paper and hid in a drawer. No one knew her full thoughts. No one asked. And still, she carried them. In time, her children grew. Her hair grayed. The rhythm of the house slowed. If she became a widow, her life would change again. Mourning brought both restriction and release. For many months, she would dress in black. She would withdraw from social circles. She would speak in lowered tones, attend only the most solemn events. But she would also gain space, a strange kind of freedom. Without a husband, she might control her own money, her own schedule. If the household could be maintained, she would live in a state of quiet authority, respected for her loss, allowed to speak more freely than before. Not all widows mourned forever. Some remarried, some did not. Those who remained alone often found strength in solitude. They filled their time with letters, charities, and memories. And though they rarely declared it, many felt more themselves in widowhood than they had at any earlier point in life. Still, the world expected certain appearances. She maintained her grace. She welcomed guests. She poured tea with steady hands. Her thoughts, as always, remained her own. And while much of her life unfolded in the background, behind doors, beneath custom, under the weight of others' decisions, she shaped the world in ways that were never fully seen. She taught her children kindness. She kept the household warm. She preserved traditions that others took for granted. She endured losses, managed illness, corrected servants gently, supported neighbors in quiet ways. None of these things came with ceremony, but they carried the home forward, and through them she left her mark. Not carved into stone or printed on paper, but etched into the rhythm of daily life, in the way a child opened a letter, the way a guest was made to feel welcome, the way the house felt in winter when the fire crackled and the curtains were drawn just so. This was her place, not imposed, but chosen each day through grace, effort, and patience. A place held together not by law or power, but by devotion. And though history rarely remembers her name, her presence lived in every polished banister, every clean collar, every moment of quiet stability. The world beyond her home was noisy, uncertain, and changing fast. But inside, she moved through her days with care, not because she was weak, but because she believed her role mattered. And in doing so, she shaped not only her house, but the century. Chapter 5. Lunch with Arsenic. The midday hour approaches. Light filters through the tall windows of the dining room, diffused by sheer curtains embroidered with careful detail. Shadows soften against the wainscoting. The table has been laid with silver, each piece placed with precision. Linen napkins rest beside the fine china, folded like quiet blossoms. A small floral arrangement sits at the center, not too bold, not too bright, just enough to suggest care. In the hallway, the steady sound of steps approaches. The family is preparing for lunch. The lady of the house has changed dresses. Her morning attire, suited for writing letters and overseeing the household, has been replaced with something lighter. Her gloves have been set aside. She washes her hands at the porcelain basin before entering the room. The scent of rose soap lingers gently on her skin. The meal is served in quiet courses. A soup, clear broth, perhaps chicken or barley, ladled into warm bowls. A meat dish follows, often mutton or beef, paired with vegetables softened in butter. There may be bread, sliced from a fresh loaf, and tea poured into delicate cups. A small sweet may arrive at the end, perhaps a stewed pear or a cake dusted with sugar. Everything appears calm. Everything is in order. But beneath the surface of this simple meal lies a world of unseen risks. Risks that no one at the table may truly recognize. Victorian food, for all its refinement, was not always safe. Behind the kitchen door, ingredients were chosen based on appearance, availability, and preservation, not always on purity. The science of food safety was young, and regulations were nearly non-existent. Adulteration was common. It was easy to stretch a product, to brighten its color, to make it appear fresher than it truly was. Flour, for instance, might be whitened with alum or chalk. Bread was often bleached to appear more refined, even if it made the stomach ache. Milk, especially in the cities, was rarely pure. Watered down, skimmed, or left standing in warm conditions, it became a source of illness. To disguise its age, sellers sometimes added lead or plaster. Even sweets, those treats so beloved by children, carried danger. Candies were often colored with pigments that would later be banned. Bright green, made with arsenic. Red, created from mercury salts. Yellow, drawn from lead chromate. A peppermint lozenge might glow with color and sparkle in the light, but it also carried the power to sicken the child who held it on their tongue. These additives were not hidden maliciously. They were accepted, sold openly, praised even. The link between chemical dyes and sickness had not yet been fully proven, and so the confectioner stirred his sugar syrup with pride, unaware that each drop carried poison. In wealthier homes, the food appeared safer. Servants purchased meat from reputable butchers. The lady of the house oversaw the grocer's deliveries. Milk came in capped bottles, bread in paper sleeves. Yet contamination traveled easily through the handles of unwashed pots, the cloths used to wipe counters, the fingers of a cook who had not paused to clean her hands. Refrigeration in the modern sense did not exist. Ice was costly and scarce. Perishables were kept in cool cupboards or on shaded shelves, but they aged quickly. A piece of fish, fresh in the morning, could sour by nightfall. The stomachache that followed was seen as common, unpleasant, but ordinary. People spoke of indigestion, of colic, of biliousness. They blamed weather, constitution, or nerves. Seldom did they suspect the lunch itself. Food was not the only danger. The very air in a Victorian home could carry quiet harm. Walls were painted with vivid color, emerald greens, peacock blues, deep crimsons. These shades were the height of fashion, a sign of taste and refinement. But many paints were made with arsenic. The bright greens especially, beloved in wallpapers and curtains, released a slow, invisible dust into the rooms they adorned. Children played beside those walls. Women sat beneath those curtains, sewing or reading by candlelight, breathing in particles that would linger for hours. Headaches became common. So did faintness, nausea, skin rashes. Some began to suspect. A doctor might recommend removing a certain paper or airing out a bedroom. But few understood the source, and fewer still could afford to redecorate with safer materials. Arsenic was not only in the walls. It found its way into clothing, especially dyes used in dresses and ribbons. A woman might wear a stunning green gown to a ball, admired by all, praised for her taste, and returned home with sore eyes and raw skin where the fabric brushed her arms. In the process of making these garments, workers suffered more directly. Those who dyed fabrics or applied color to artificial flowers often did so with bare hands. Their nails turned green, their joints swelled, their lungs burned. The illnesses they endured were called occupational hazards, part of the cost of labor. Their lives, often brief, passed with little note. Meanwhile, in the parlors of London and Paris, the finished products glowed under gaslight, beautiful, dangerous, and worn without question. Cosmetics held similar risks. Though public opinion frowned on heavy makeup for respectable women, light powders and creams were widely used. Pale skin was the ideal, not just for beauty, but for what it represented. To be fair was to be wealthy. It meant one stayed indoors, away from sun and labor. To achieve this look, women turned to powders made with lead. They dabbed their cheeks with mixtures of vinegar and white minerals. They applied rouge to lips, often containing mercury compounds. Over time, their skin thinned, their teeth loosened, their breath grew metallic. But they persisted because beauty was a duty, and because alternatives were few. Perfumes, hair oils, and skin tonics filled the shelves of apothecaries and dressing tables. Many were fragrant and effective. Others were laced with ingredients that today would never pass inspection. Belladonna drops were placed in the eyes to dilate the pupils. Opium was infused into creams to ease blemishes. These preparations were not treated with suspicion. On the contrary, they were advertised proudly in newspapers, on posters, in shop windows. A bottle of tonic might promise vitality, purity, and peace, even as it damaged the liver or dulled the senses. Illness in this world was frequent, but the cause often remained hidden. When a child became pale and thin, the family blamed weak nerves or bad air. When a woman's skin turned blotchy, they blamed emotion or fatigue. And when a servant collapsed in the scullery, they simply called the doctor, who arrived with smelling salts and folded hands. Medicine itself carried its own dangers. There were doctors with training and experience, but there were also countless peddlers, chemists, and street vendors offering cure-alls for every known ailment. Elixirs for headaches, powders for sleep, drops for coughs. Many of these remedies contained alcohol, morphine, or cocaine. Some were little more than sugar water. Others were strong enough to knock a patient into unconsciousness. People took them without question. Mothers gave their children syrups to keep them quiet. Laborers drank tinctures to push through aching joints. Wives swallowed tablets to ease the pain of monthly bleeding, unaware that the ingredients could damage their hearts. There was comfort in routine, in the taste of a trusted bottle, in the soft rustle of powdered paper between the hands, in the doctor's voice, calm and certain, assuring the family that the worst had passed, even when it had not. Danger, in the Victorian age, rarely wore a frightening face. It came dressed in elegance, in carefully printed labels, in wallpaper patterns and pressed flowers, in warm meals and fashionable gowns. It whispered rather than shouted, and because of that, it stayed. It moved through homes of all sizes, rich and poor, city and country. It traveled in shopping baskets and linen closets, in lunch trays and medicine cabinets. Its effects were slow, often silent. A cough that never left, a rash that worsened each season, a weariness no sleep could cure. These things were accepted, explained away, called fate, but within them lived the shadow of a truth not yet fully seen. The world was changing. Science was waking. New voices were beginning to ask questions about dyes, about dust, about the strange patterns of sickness in well-ordered homes. In time, reforms would come. Laws would be passed. Poisons removed. But for now, the danger remained, woven into the fabric of daily life. And so, Lunch continued. The meat served. The tea poured. The cloth napkins lifted to lips. The guests spoke kindly, smiled politely, complimenting the arrangement of the room. No one paused to ask where the color in the wallpaper came from. No one wondered why the daughter had lost weight this season. No one questioned the bottle on the shelf marked tonic, because everything seemed as it should, because that was enough. For now. Chapter 6: The Rules of Society. The hour drifts toward afternoon. The light outside has softened, not quite golden, but warmer now than before. The sun rests lower in the sky, casting long lines across garden walls and iron gates. In the drawing rooms and parlors of Victorian England, this is the time of social visiting. Not by chance, not spontaneously, but by design. A carriage arrives at a modest townhouse. The horses slow to a gentle stop. The footman steps down first, his gloves white and movements crisp. He opens the door and helps the guest descend. A woman, dressed in a walking gown of soft gray wool, steps out carefully. Her gloved hand adjusts the brim of her hat. She carries a small calling card in her fingers, crisp, cream-colored, printed with her name in elegant script. She approaches the house. She does not knock. The front door is opened by a maid who offers no words, only a glance of recognition. The caller hands over her card without speaking. The maid receives it with both hands, turns without pause, and disappears toward the rear of the house. The visitor waits in silence. This is how society begins, with ritual, with roles, with stillness. The card is presented to the lady of the house. She reads it, nods once, and instructs that the guest be shown into the parlor. No one raises their voice. No one rushes. Everything moves according to the rhythm set not by emotion, but by custom. This is the heart of Victorian society, a world held together not by affection, but by etiquette. From birth to death, from the grandest ball to the smallest cup of tea, one's actions were shaped by expectations, and those expectations governed everything. There were rules for entering a room, for leaving, for addressing a stranger, for walking in the park, for holding a fork, for folding gloves, for speaking of illness, for avoiding unpleasantness, for maintaining distance, especially when closeness might tempt the tongue or invite the wrong kind of attention. For the upper and middle classes, these rules were not seen as burdens, but as markers of identity. To know them, to follow them without pause, was to belong, and to break them, even in small ways, could bring embarrassment, or worse, isolation. A young woman, for example, could not speak to a gentleman unless properly introduced. To do so without context was to risk her reputation. Even in conversation, her gaze should remain soft, her voice moderate, her language appropriate. She might visit a friend's home, but only during designated hours, never too early, never too late. If the friend was not receiving callers that day, the maid would return the card without inviting her in. It was not a personal slight. It was simply how things were done. The length of a visit was measured, not by conversation, but by time. 15 to 20 minutes was the standard. Any longer might seem presumptuous. Any shorter, dismissive. Even the simple act of calling on someone carried layers of unspoken meaning. The style of one's card, the neatness of its edges, the corner turned down, indicating a personal visit rather than one made by servant. Society, in the Victorian mind, was a stage. One entered carefully, performed correctly, and exited with dignity. At dinner parties, the rules expanded even further. Guests received invitations weeks in advance. The reply, always written, was sent quickly. To ignore or delay was impolite. On the day of the event, great care was taken with dress. A gentleman in black tailcoat, gloves, and white tie. A lady in her evening gown, shoulders bare but posture upright, jewelry modest unless the occasion called for brilliance. Upon arrival, one greeted the host and hostess with a quiet word of thanks, then allowed oneself to be introduced, placed, and seated. No one chose where to sit. That decision belonged to the host. To disregard it would be to offend. The meal began with soup, then fish, then meat, then sweets. Courses arrived in procession, served by footmen moving in practiced silence. One never asked for salt. If it was not already offered, it was considered rude to mention it. Bread was taken with the fingers, not cut with a knife. Wine glasses were filled only when needed. If one declined a course, it was done politely, with minimal explanation. Conversation was expected, light, pleasant, never too loud. Politics might arise, but only among the men. The ladies were meant to speak of books, travel, perhaps music or flowers. The tone was friendly, but never familiar. Jokes were gentle, laughter subdued. No guest left the table before the hostess. No one commented on the food unless complimenting the cook's skill, and even then, briefly. After dinner, the women retired to another room for tea or sherry, while the men remained behind with port and cigars. This division was not questioned. It was simply part of the dance. Back in the parlor, the ladies might speak more freely, but not too freely. Compliments were exchanged. Hints of gossip floated on the air, but only in coded form. Names were not spoken unless safely removed from the circle. A woman's reputation could be injured by a single raised eyebrow or careless remark, and once damaged, repair was nearly impossible. It was said that a lady's name should appear in print only 3 times in her life: at birth, at marriage, and at death. To be mentioned otherwise was to risk exposure. For men, the rules were fewer but still significant. A gentleman offered his arm. He opened the door. He never spoke with heat in the presence of ladies. He never swore. He never allowed a woman to stand if a seat could be given. And if introduced to someone of higher station, he bowed, waited, and responded only when spoken to. He was expected to be courteous, restrained, and above all, calm. Rage was common in private life, in households, in factories, in the army. But in society, anger was concealed. Disagreement, if it occurred, was coded in formality, often buried under layers of language that shielded emotion from view. Duels were no longer fought, but reputations could still be ruined. A slight at a ball, a letter left unanswered, a smile withheld at the wrong moment. These things could open cracks in the delicate framework of a family's standing. For women, the cost of misstep was even higher. If a woman danced more than twice with the same gentleman, rumors might follow. If she walked alone, even in daylight, she might be watched. If her dress dipped too low, or her laugh carried too far, she might be whispered about behind fans and folding screens. And yet, within these constraints, there were pathways of power. A hostess who knew how to arrange a table, who could place rivals apart and friends together, who could fill a room with warmth while revealing nothing. She held a quiet command. A wife who shielded her husband's failures, who managed their children with poise, who handled difficult guests with grace, she earned silent respect. An elderly widow who had seen generations come and go, whose opinion was sought by younger women and feared by men, she became a kind of institution, not loud, not official, but influential. Society was built on such figures, not the ones remembered in books, but the ones who knew how to keep things moving, smoothly, silently, safely. They knew what to say when someone entered the room in grief. They knew how to change the subject when tension rose. They knew how to guide conversation from danger to comfort without making it seem like a correction. These were not tricks. They were survival. Because beneath all the ceremony, Victorian society was a mirror, polished, delicate, and quick to crack. One's name, one's posture, one's place at the table, each carried weight. And those who learned to navigate it, who knew when to nod, when to pause, when to speak without speaking, they thrived. Not through wealth alone, but through control, through restraint, through understanding the rules so well they could bend them just slightly, just quietly to shape their own space within them. And so the caller finishes her tea. The lady of the house thanks her kindly. The maid returns to collect the card, now resting on the side table. The visit ends just as it should, with a parting smile, a measured farewell, and the soft click of the door closing behind. Outside, the world has dimmed slightly. The sun begins its slow descent. Another house waits, another call to make. The ritual continues, because in this world, how one moves matters more than where one goes. And the rules, though invisible, are everywhere. Chapter 7. The Life Below Stairs. Morning has broken once more, though the sun has not yet reached the windows of the lower floor. The world upstairs still lies wrapped in sleep, but below the main staircase, deep in the servant quarters, the day is already underway. A bell rings softly in the dark. Not loud, but sharp enough to stir the figure lying beneath a thin blanket on a narrow cot. The scullery maid blinks once, then again, and rises without sound. She does not speak. She does not stretch. Her feet find the cold stone floor with practiced care. There is no waiting in these rooms. No lingering over the warmth of the covers. No gentle start to the day. The work begins before the first guest lifts a teacup or draws back a curtain. In truth, it began the day before and never truly ends. This is the life below stairs, the world behind the fine upholstery and polished floors. A world of labor, silence, routine, and invisible hands. While the family above rests in clean beds with warm bricks at their feet, the servants below scrub, sweep, boil, sew, polish, and prepare every surface, every garment, every meal. The house runs on their movement, though their names may never be spoken in the drawing room. The staff is not a single body, but a system, structured, ordered, deeply hierarchical. At the top stands the butler. He is the most senior male servant, responsible for the wine cellar, the formal dining room, and the general behavior of the male staff. His word is final, his manner calm, his voice measured, his coat dark and immaculate. Beside him, though ranked below, is the housekeeper. She oversees the female staff and the condition of the home. She knows the inventory of every linen press, the age of every curtain, the source of every stain. She is efficient, sharp-eyed, and precise in her instructions. Beneath them, the structure spreads out. Footmen, cooks, maids, valets, nursemaids, scullery staff, and laundry girls. Each role has its boundaries. Each person knows their place. The footman serves at table, runs errands, and opens doors. He is tall, clean, and presentable, often chosen as much for appearance as ability. The cook rules the kitchen. She plans meals, directs helpers, and guards her pantry with fierce pride. The parlor maid dusts the sitting rooms, cares for the silver, and sets the table with perfect spacing between fork and knife. The housemaids clean the bedrooms, empty the chamber pots, draw baths, shake out rugs, and light fires. Each bed they make must be flawless, the pillows fluffed without a single wrinkle. The scullery maid is lowest of all, youngest, newest, tasked with the wettest, dirtiest, hardest chores. She scrubs pots until her hands bleed. She fetches water from the pump, hauls coal, and cleans floors by hand. She eats last, speaks least, and works hardest. There is a rhythm to it all, a strict order that repeats daily, each task falling in place like steps in a dance. At 5 in the morning, the fires are lit. By 6, the kitchen stirs to life. Bread dough is kneaded. Tea water set to boil. The cook stands beside the range, already issuing instructions. By 7, the hallways are swept. The boots are polished. The first pots are scrubbed clean. By 8, the family begins to stir. The valet helps the master dress. The lady's maid prepares her mistress's gown, brushes her hair, selects her gloves. The servants are never seen in pairs. They do not laugh. They do not linger. They pass through rooms like shadows, setting a cushion straight, brushing ash from the hearth, retrieving a dropped handkerchief. They wait in corners, eyes down, ears open. They know the creak of every stair, the squeak of every hinge, the chill in the northeast bedroom, the spot on the third rug that must always be turned to hide the burn. And yet, for all their knowledge, they remain nameless to many who live above them. A guest might ring for tea, and a maid will arrive. She will set the tray down without a word, pour with care, and withdraw before her presence is fully acknowledged. The tea will be praised, the cake complimented, the music discussed. But the hand that stirred the batter, that cleaned the cups and polished the spoons, remains outside the conversation. Meals are a performance. The family sits in elegance, while behind the door, in the sweltering kitchen, the real work is done. The scullery maid washes the same plates 5 times in a day. Each time they return, spotted or smudged, she begins again. Burned fingers are ignored, blisters covered with cloth. There is no complaint. In the servants' hall, meals are taken quickly and in silence. A shared table, plain dishes, thick bread, stewed vegetables. No wine, no pudding. There are rules even here. No speaking back to superiors. No sitting before those of higher rank. No missing duties for personal matters. Personal time is rare. Free hours may come once a week or once a month, depending on the household. Often, they are spent writing letters home, mending stockings, or walking quickly to the nearest chapel before returning in time for supper. The wages are low. Some servants send part of their pay to family. Some save for the future. Most spend nothing at all. There is nowhere to go, and no time to get there. In smaller households, the lines blur. A maid may serve at table and clean the nursery in the same day. She learns to juggle roles, to switch from silver polish to lullaby without pause. She keeps her own sorrows to herself. A broken heart, a death in the family, a toothache, ignored for months. She cannot afford rest. She does not own the hours she lives in. And still, she shows up the next morning, puts on her apron, ties her hair, returns to the same hallway, the same stairs, the same worn spot in front of the scullery sink. Some endure for years. Some rise through the ranks, from housemaid to parlor-maid, from kitchen assistant to cook. A few become trusted, so trusted they are remembered in wills, in final letters, in quiet conversations. But most vanish. When they grow old or injured or no longer quick, they are replaced. Their names removed from the ledger. Their room passed to someone else. The family above continues. The routines remain. The house, as always, is kept clean. It is easy to forget them, but they remember everything. They remember the child who cried in his sleep, the guest who always arrived late, the mistress who never smiled when her husband was near. They see what others miss. They hear what is not meant to be heard. They keep secrets, not because they are asked to, but because they must. Their silence is part of their role. Their labor makes the life above possible. Without them, the house would fall apart, not in days, but in hours. Dust would gather, fires go out, meals go unserved, letters undelivered, guests left waiting at the door. The house may be elegant, but it rests on hard work. Work done in silence, in darkness, in corners. And yet, below stairs, there is more than just service. There is companionship, shared jokes whispered in the larder, small kindnesses exchanged after hours, the quiet understanding between those who live in service of others. The cook might save the soft end of a loaf for the girl whose mother is ill. The valet might leave a note for the footman, warning him that the master is in a foul mood. The housemaid might tuck a sprig of lavender beneath a pillow when she knows sleep has been thin. These are not duties. They are human moments, stitched between hours of obedience. And they matter. They are what make the days bearable. what make the years pass with more than just weariness. For those who serve, life is not a matter of dreams. It is a matter of survival, of endurance. But even in the narrow space beneath the main floor, there are lives full of hope. A girl saves to open a shop. A boy studies at night by candlelight, hoping one day to teach. A cook thinks of her garden, waiting for spring. They have names, histories, longings. But when the bell rings, they rise. They wipe their hands. They button their uniforms. They climb the back stairs without a sound. Because the family is ready for tea. Because the drawing room must be aired. Because the hallway rug is out of place. And everything must appear perfect. Chapter 8. The Business of Death. The shutters are closed. The curtains drawn tight. The mirrors have been covered with dark cloth, and the clocks, once ticking quietly in their corners, have been stopped. The fire burns low in the hearth, casting long shadows across the room. The house is silent now, not in the usual sense of peace, but in that particular hush that follows loss. Someone has died, and with their final breath, the household has stepped into mourning. In the Victorian world, death was not an event. It was a ceremony, a passage governed by rules as complex and rigid as those that shaped life. Grief, while deeply personal, was expressed in ways that were public, visible, and heavily structured. The process began almost immediately. The body was not removed from the home. It remained, often in the front parlor or a specially designated mourning room. Family members took turns keeping vigil, sometimes reading prayers or sitting in silence. The windows were shaded to keep the light low. Visitors were discouraged unless they came to pay respects. A death meant the entire household shifted its rhythm. Black crepe was hung on the doorknob or tied in bows across the railing. Staff dressed in muted tones. Even the bell pull might be draped in mourning fabric, a signal to those who passed by on the street that sorrow had settled inside. For the family, mourning dress became both shield and declaration. The widow wore black from head to toe, thick wool in winter, dull silk in summer, often layered with heavy veils and gloves. Jewelry, if worn at all, was made of jet or woven from the hair of the deceased. Her life slowed to a near standstill. No visits, no outings, no music, no laughter. For a time, she existed almost entirely in shadow. This was known as full mourning, and it lasted a year and a day. During this time, a widow was expected to separate herself from society, to grieve with dignity, to remain solemn and modest. It was not only a reflection of her love, but of her respectability. After the first year, she might shift into second mourning, still darkly dressed, but allowed small touches of gray or lavender. Later, in half mourning, she might return to muted colors, dove, mauve, soft lilac, before eventually resuming ordinary dress. For children mourning a parent, the period was often 6 months. For a parent mourning a child, it could last far longer. Even distant cousins and in-laws had prescribed periods of grief, all carefully laid out in books of etiquette and mourning guides sold in every respectable shop. Death had become an industry. Funeral directors, once known as undertakers, handled not only the burial, but the orchestration of the entire event. They arranged the coffin, the carriages, the floral tributes, the announcements in the newspaper. They provided black horses, draped in velvet, and mourning coaches trimmed with plumes. Caskets were lined with satin or silk, often displayed before burial so visitors could say goodbye. Some were left open, others closed. It depended on the family's wishes and the condition of the deceased. Photographers, too, played a part in this ritual. It was not uncommon to commission a final portrait, known as a memento mori, after death. The body was posed, dressed, sometimes even propped into lifelike positions. A child might be captured lying peacefully in bed, surrounded by flowers. An adult seated upright in a chair, eyes painted open to mimic the living. These images were not hidden. They were framed, displayed, sent to relatives. They served as memory, as proof of love, as evidence that the lost had once lived. Hair, too, was kept snipped from the head before burial, braided into lockets, woven into brooches, or even formed into elaborate wreaths beneath glass domes. These keepsakes were passed down through generations, cherished as physical links to the ones who had gone. Even correspondence carried the weight of grief. Letters of condolence were written with care, never rushed, always in proper tone. Mourning stationery, bordered in black, was used for all correspondence in the months after a death. Envelopes, too, bore the mark of sorrow, and their arrival signaled to the recipient what had occurred before the letter was even opened. Victorian mourning was not only about feeling loss. It was about performing it, showing the world, through dress and ritual, the depth of one's attachment and the sincerity of one's grief. It was also a way to control the chaos of death, because beneath the ribbons and veils, death was still terrifying. It arrived often and without warning. Diseases moved quickly: cholera, typhus, tuberculosis, and medical care, while advancing, was far from reliable. A child who coughed in the evening might be gone by dawn. A mother who went into labor might never rise from her bed again. A father returning from work might collapse before reaching the steps. Life expectancy was low, especially for the poor, and even among the wealthy, few reached old age without mourning more than one close relation. To create a system around death, to dress it, name it, stage it, gave it form. It became something to manage rather than something to fear. And the rituals, though heavy, offered comfort. They allowed the grieving to move through sorrow with structure, to focus on what needed doing rather than on what had been lost. But for all its order, mourning was never easy. The weight of the clothes, especially in summer, made every movement slower. The black dye stained the skin. The veil obscured the face, made breathing difficult, turned the world dim. Widows sometimes fainted at funerals, their corsets too tight, their emotions too strong, the heat unbearable. Children, too young to understand, were dressed in black and told to sit still, to bow their heads, to stay quiet. Men, though expected to grieve less visibly, were not spared. A black armband marked their mourning. A change in schedule, a pause in conversation. They were given less time, less space, less sympathy, but not less pain. And when mourning ended, when the crepe was removed, the cards no longer bordered in black. The dress returned to color. The adjustment could be strange. Grief does not obey a calendar, and for many, the end of mourning attire did not mean the end of mourning itself. It simply meant the world expected them to move on. And so they did, slowly, carefully, carrying the memory in quieter ways. A photograph on the desk, a ring worn on a chain, a name whispered before sleep. Death in the Victorian era was visible. It stood at the center of art, of fashion, of social expectation. It appeared in poems, in novels, in plays, in sermons. It shaped architecture in the rise of cemeteries designed like gardens, places of beauty as well as rest. It influenced jewelry, literature, and music. And in every parlor, behind every closed door, it waited. Because everyone knew it would come. And when it did, they would be ready. Not because the pain would be less, but because they had learned how to bear it. Together, in silence, in structure, in black. Chapter 9, Diagnosis, Hysteria. The house rests in the afternoon stillness. Outside, the trees sway gently in the wind, their branches bending with the weight of the coming season. Inside, the rooms feel quieter than usual. Firelight flickers across the hearth, casting a slow, steady rhythm of gold across the patterned wallpaper. In the hallway, the sound of footsteps is soft and deliberate, as though even the servants sense that something within has shifted. In the drawing room, a woman sits beneath the window, facing the garden. Her book lies closed in her lap, untouched since morning, though her gaze seems fixed on the ivy-covered wall beyond the glass. She is not watching the wind move through the leaves. She has not spoken much in recent days. She eats very little. Her replies come gently, with forced cheer, and only when directly addressed. At first, her family believed it to be a passing tiredness. Perhaps she had not been sleeping well. Perhaps the demands of the household had become too much. Her husband offered to cancel their guests for the week, thinking a quieter house might lift her mood. Her sisters suggested a tonic, something light to settle the nerves. The housekeeper prepared her favorite tea and placed a shawl near her chair, and yet none of it seemed to change anything. A physician has been summoned. He arrives with a formal nod and a steady voice, carrying his small black bag in a demeanor shaped by years of polite certainty. His questions are brief and not particularly personal. He observes more than he listens. After a short conversation, he speaks with the lady's husband in the study, away from her earshot. He gives the condition a name, one that is used often in homes like this, a word that floats easily into the silence: hysteria. The diagnosis carries a calm kind of authority, as though naming her distress makes it more manageable. There is no mention of sorrow, no discussion of loneliness or the pressure of appearances. No one asks about the parts of her day that feel hollow or what lies beneath the long silences between meals. Instead, the physician prescribes rest and perhaps a change of environment. In the world she inhabits, this diagnosis is not unusual. Many women in similar homes hear the same conclusion when their strength begins to slip, when sleep becomes elusive, or when tears arrive without warning, or when their appetite fades for reasons they cannot explain. The term provides a convenient answer. It is spoken softly and often carries no judgment, only a kind of vague sympathy and the suggestion that time and quiet will bring recovery. The treatment often begins with a period of enforced stillness. She is advised not to exert herself. Her books are taken away, her correspondence paused, her walks replaced with hours in a darkened room. She is told that the best remedy is complete rest, not only for the body, but for the mind. Servants are instructed to keep the curtains drawn and to speak as little as possible in her presence. Meals are brought on trays and left beside her bed, uneaten more often than not. Friends are discouraged from calling. Her children are kept at a distance. In some cases, she is sent to the countryside where a hired nurse supervises her routine. Days stretch long beneath dim skies. The only changes come with the arrival of another cup of broth or a brief word from the doctor during his weekly call. This is called the rest cure, and it is practiced widely among women of her standing. It was developed to treat what physicians considered overactive nerves, which they believed could be calmed by the removal of all intellectual and emotional stimulation. There is no discussion about whether the silence is helping. There is simply the assumption that stillness will soothe. For some women, this confinement lasts weeks. Others remain under such care for months, their days shaped entirely by the choices of others. Each hour becomes part of a schedule: when to wake, when to lie down again, when to eat, and when to sit in the garden under supervision. Often, the symptoms do not fade. Instead, they change. She begins to sleep longer, but wakes with a weight behind her eyes. Her muscles lose their strength from disuse. Her mind becomes foggy, her sense of self blurred by isolation. Those around her note the change and interpret it as a sign that the illness is deepening, never considering that the treatment itself may be part of what has dimmed her. In some cases, the measures become more extreme. Electric stimulation is applied to the limbs, believed to awaken sluggish nerves. Cold baths are prescribed to refresh the system. In more serious situations, women are removed from their homes entirely and placed in institutions where their behavior is studied, documented, and measured by strangers. Asylums are often thought of as places of last resort, and yet many women find themselves within those walls not because they are dangerous, but because they have failed to conform to the expectations placed upon them. A widow who cannot stop crying, a daughter who withdraws after a family loss, a wife who questions her husband's commands, these women are sometimes labeled unstable, disobedient, or oversensitive. Once admitted, their world narrows even further. Each day begins and ends under the direction of others. Their words are recorded in neat handwriting by men in coats who rarely call them by name. Their emotions are dissected, categorized, and analyzed, but rarely are they believed. Outside of these institutions, the diagnosis of hysteria continues to ripple through homes and families. For young women, it may arise the moment they begin to express thoughts that do not align with what is expected of them. A teenager who refuses to marry the suitor chosen for her might be described as unwell. A girl who faints in church or who shows signs of melancholy is quickly surrounded by concerned aunts and whispered theories. Among wives and mothers, hysteria is often used to explain the effects of exhaustion, especially when domestic burdens become overwhelming. A woman who begins to weep while tending her children, who fails to keep up with the pace of the household, or who cannot muster enthusiasm for another afternoon of polite conversation, is advised to seek rest. For widows and unmarried women, the label is even more readily applied. A woman who lives alone may be seen as fragile. One who avoids company might be regarded with suspicion. If she chooses a life of solitude, it is often assumed to be the result of emotional damage rather than deliberate decision. And yet, despite the frequency of the diagnosis, very little is truly understood about what these women endure. Their pain is quiet, often invisible. Their discomfort masked by polite behavior. Many are hesitant to speak of what they feel, fearing dismissal or misunderstanding. They know that words spoken too freely may lead to more confinement, more treatments, more distance between themselves and the life they once lived. What they experience is not always rooted in illness. Sometimes it is grief, given no space to breathe. Sometimes it is the strain of living within rigid expectations, where every action is weighed and every word examined. Other times it is the slow fading of joy, the dull ache of a life where the heart has no place to stretch. A woman might long for purpose, for knowledge, for connection, but be told instead that her duty is to keep house, bear children, and remain calm in the face of all things. Her passions may be seen as excess, her silence mistaken for health, her tears interpreted as weakness rather than a response to being unheard. The diagnosis of hysteria gives her behavior a name but denies her story. It allows others to speak on her behalf while removing her ability to explain her experience in her own words. And yet, within this narrow space, small acts of resistance still emerge. Some women begin to write, quietly, in journals or on pages hidden within drawers. Their thoughts, though unseen by others, become a refuge. Others turn to poetry, music, or prayer, not as cures, but as ways to endure. There are physicians who begin to question the old methods, who listen more closely, who spend time with their patients rather than reducing them to familiar patterns. But these voices remain rare. And so, in homes across the country, the pattern repeats. A woman is told that her nerves are tired, that her energy must be restored, that she should avoid anything that stirs her thoughts or emotions. She is not asked about what matters to her, or whether she feels safe, or if the life around her offers any comfort at all. Her condition becomes a quiet performance, one where she learns to speak carefully, to avoid alarming those who hold authority over her future, to smile just enough to be left alone. In this way, the diagnosis does more than explain suffering. It shapes it, and though the house remains tidy, and the fires are kept lit, and meals arrive at the expected hour, something essential remains missing. There is no room for honesty. No invitation to share what aches without being corrected. No recognition that the symptoms may not lie within the woman, but in the space she is forced to inhabit. And yet, despite the weight of this misunderstanding, she continues. She wakes each morning, moves through the hours, and meets the day with a quiet endurance. Not because she is weak, but because her strength is required in ways no one sees. And perhaps, somewhere beyond the narrow view of the physician's lens, her story will one day be told as it truly is. Not as a disorder, but as a life lived under quiet pressure, full of complexity and worthy of understanding. Chapter 10: The Underworld. The gas lamps flicker to life as the sun sinks behind the rooftops. Long shadows stretch across the brick-paved streets, softening the edges of the city. From the windows of drawing rooms and parlors, warm yellow light spills outward, the glow of comfort, of order, of well-practiced routine. Inside those homes, families settle in for the evening. Servants prepare for supper, and coal burns gently behind cast-iron grates. But beyond those windows lies another world. Just a few streets away, the cobblestones grow uneven. The buildings crowd together more tightly. Chimneys lean, doorways sag, and as darkness gathers in the alleys and courts, the city's underworld begins to stir. This hidden side of Victorian life receives no mention in the polite conversations of the upper class. It is absent from the formal drawing rooms and quiet country estates. Yet it exists, constant, persistent, and inescapably real. In the poorest corners of the city, entire families live within a single room. Crumbling tenements stretch upward into the smoke, each floor more crowded than the last. The walls are damp, the air thick with soot and steam. Beds are shared, sometimes in shifts. Children sleep beneath staircases. Water is fetched from the street pump. Sanitation is unreliable. Rats move freely. In these places, silence is rare. The cries of infants, the shouting of vendors, the coughing of the ill, these sounds weave into the rhythm of every day. In winter, the cold presses in through broken panes. In summer, the heat lingers in the alleys long after sunset. Sickness spreads quickly, and relief comes slowly, if at all. Among these streets, work is both scarce and exhausting. Men line up outside factories, hoping to be chosen for a day's labor. Others haul coal, sweep chimneys, or move goods by cart, often for wages that barely sustain them. Women take in washing, mend clothing, or scrub floors. Some work in the market stalls, others in the backs of taverns. There are few options for the desperate. Prostitution is widespread, not always out of choice, but often out of necessity. Many women who turn to the trade do so to feed their children, to pay rent, to survive a week longer. They are judged by those who pass them in the street, yet rarely is their story asked. Behind the painted face and practiced smile is often a history of abandonment, widowhood, or escape from something worse. Children, too, are caught in this web. They sell matches, shine shoes, carry messages, and steal what they can. Chimney sweeps are often boys no older than 8, sent into narrow flues with brushes and scraped knees. Their bodies are small enough to fit where others cannot, and their coughs are ignored. Some carry water down muddy streets. Others are left alone while their mothers seek work or rest. Education is limited, if available at all. Many do not learn to read. Others grow up too quickly, shaped by hardship and survival. As the city grows, crime begins to organize itself. Gangs form in the poorest districts, offering protection, threats, or both. Pickpockets work in teams, slipping through crowds near train stations and markets. Burglars plan by watching windows, listening for schedules. Swindlers wear fine coats and speak with the accents of gentlemen, persuading the lonely and the hopeful alike. The term criminal class begins to appear in newspapers, a label applied broadly, often unfairly, to those who struggle at the edges. Writers describe entire neighborhoods as dens of vice. Policemen patrol the boundaries but rarely cross them unless called to do so. Beneath the surface, the divide between rich and poor deepens. The respectable families who dine by candlelight often know little of what lies in the courts behind their own gardens. They speak of charity, and some give generously. But few walk through the neighborhoods where hunger sits openly on doorsteps and laundry hangs limp from broken windows. In these places, hope becomes something fragile. People make do with less than they need. They grow tough not out of pride, but out of habit. Their hands crack in the winter. Their backs ache from labor. Their eyes grow sharp, watching every opportunity. Sometimes, a stroke of luck offers a way out, a stable job, a marriage, a sponsor. But more often, life remains where it is, and the days repeat. The church offers comfort, though its reach is limited. Missionaries walk the alleys, handing out leaflets and bowls of soup. Temperance societies preach the dangers of drink, offering support to those who seek it. Ragged schools welcome children for an hour or two each day, giving them chalk, slates, and hope in small doses. Philanthropists arrive with notebooks, determined to understand the lives of the poor. Some write with compassion, others with detachment. They record the size of the rooms, the number of occupants, the kinds of meals eaten. They draw maps of suffering, believing that awareness will lead to change. And slowly some change comes. Sanitation improves. Health campaigns begin. Housing reforms are discussed in Parliament. But for many living in the underworld of the Victorian city, those changes come too late or too far away. The grind of poverty shapes not only the body, but the mind. In homes without space or rest, tempers flare quickly. Marriages strain. Children grow silent or wild. Addiction takes root to gin, laudanum, or anything that numbs the reality of another cold morning. Gin shops stand on nearly every corner. Their signs swing above the doors. Their windows glow in the night. Inside, the air is thick, the floors damp, the drink cheap. A penny buys escape. For a moment, the world becomes quieter, warmer, easier to forget. Women drink as often as men, though they are judged more harshly for it. Children watch from doorways, waiting for their parents to come home. Sometimes they do, sometimes they do not. And yet, amid the struggle, there is life. There is laughter in the courtyards, rough, unfiltered, real. There are friendships forged through shared work. Neighbors look after one another when illness strikes. A woman brings broth to the family across the hall. A boy gives his crust of bread to his sister. A man shares his coal with someone who has none. Joy exists here, though it is quiet. It appears in music played on street corners, in games chalked onto the pavement, in a flower tucked behind the ear of a girl who has never owned a ribbon. These moments matter. They do not erase the hardship, but they soften its edge. The underworld of the Victorian city is not evil. It is not a place of monsters or villains. It is a space where people live with very little, holding on to what they can. It is a world shaped by inequality, misunderstood by those who never see it directly. Some try to escape it, and a few succeed. Others remain, building lives with what is available, carrying the weight of the world with quiet strength. Above them, the city continues. Bells ring, papers are delivered, coaches roll through clean streets. But beneath that surface, another rhythm beats, and it too is part of history. Chapter 11. Romance by the Rules. The garden has begun to bloom again. Small clusters of white blossoms edge the stone path, and the trimmed hedges cast long, clean shadows in the afternoon light. Birds flit between branches, their song soft, almost hesitant, as if uncertain whether they will be overheard. On the bench near the sundial, two figures sit just far enough apart to be proper. They do not speak loudly. Their words are chosen with care. Every sentence passes through several layers of restraint before reaching the air. He glances at her only briefly. She smiles, but with her gaze turned slightly away. Somewhere nearby, a chaperone pretends to read. This is how romance begins. In the Victorian era, love was not the stuff of grand declarations shouted into the night. It moved slowly, hidden beneath layers of formality. It was dressed in proper attire, escorted by rules, and followed the same well-worn paths as every generation before. Courtship was not just the business of two hearts. It involved families, reputations, financial expectations, and timing. A match could bring security, elevate social standing, and unite estates. It could also destroy reputations if handled poorly. Everything depended on conduct. A young woman of respectable birth did not seek a suitor. she was introduced. Her family arranged visits, extended invitations, and hosted dinners where eligible gentlemen could be properly observed. No respectable girl would be left alone with a man not her kin. If a conversation was necessary, a third party remained close enough to overhear. Walks in the garden were allowed, but never far from the house. Letters might be exchanged, though usually under the supervision of parents. Gifts were rare, perhaps a book, a pressed flower, or a single ribbon, and always modest in value. Any sign of boldness could be misread. A hand offered too quickly, a gaze held too long, a tone of voice too warm. These could all be interpreted as impropriety. And once such judgments began, they traveled swiftly. A woman labeled forward risked more than embarrassment. She risked being removed from consideration altogether. For men, the expectations were no less exacting. A gentleman who sought the attention of a lady was expected to behave with restraint and courtesy. His interest must be clear, but never pressing. He called at appropriate hours, expressed admiration in quiet terms, and earned the trust of her family before any serious declarations were made. Should he wish to marry, the proposal was not made to the woman first, but to her father. Only once permission had been granted could he ask for her hand directly. And even then, the moment was carefully prepared. No surprises, no spectacle. The answer, if favorable, was not shouted in joy. It was offered in a calm tone, often followed by a walk around the garden or a return to the drawing room to share the news discreetly. The engagement was then announced formally, sometimes in the local paper, other times by letter. Rings were exchanged, though often simpler than those we might expect today. A single diamond, modestly set, or perhaps a family heirloom. There were rules for how long the engagement should last, when the banns would be read, and how the wedding would be arranged. Each stage carried its own expectations about behavior, finances, and attire. Throughout, both bride and groom remained under constant observation. There were few opportunities for true privacy. Many couples did not come to know each other deeply until long after the vows had been spoken. Affection was encouraged, but only within bounds. Expressions of passion were muted. Physical contact, outside of a gloved hand offered during a dance, was rare before marriage. And yet, despite these restrictions, love did grow. It often bloomed in letters passed between houses, in soft conversations exchanged between courses, in shared moments during carriage rides, or over music played quietly in the evening. Affection was conveyed through tone, through presence, through the gentle attention to what was said and what was not. For some, the match was entirely practical. Estates aligned, fortunes combined, social positions maintained. Love was a welcome addition if it arrived, but not the foundation. For others, it was genuine affection that carried the relationship forward, even as it passed through the formal steps required by society. But not all romances followed the expected path. Some resisted. A young woman might fall for a man deemed unsuitable, a tradesman, a clerk, a teacher. He might speak well and behave with dignity, but without wealth or title, he stood little chance of acceptance. In some cases, love remained quiet and unspoken, lingering for years in silence. In others, it led to secret meetings, letters slipped through cracks and gates, or promises made beneath the cover of dusk. These affairs risked exposure, and exposure brought consequences. A woman seen in the company of a man without a chaperone could be called into question. Her reputation might suffer. Invitations could stop arriving. Prospective suitors might look elsewhere. For men, scandal might bruise their standing, but it rarely ruined them. For women, a single misstep could close doors for a lifetime. And then there were those whose love defied convention altogether. Those who felt affection towards someone of the same sex, or those who found themselves drawn to someone married or beyond their class, or otherwise forbidden. These emotions had no place in the public record. They were not acknowledged in polite conversation, but they existed nonetheless, often hidden in letters never sent, in journals locked and buried, in silences that held more weight than words ever could. Marriage, once reached, brought a new set of expectations. A wife was to manage the home, bear children, and support her husband's public life. Her affection was to remain steady and quiet, her moods controlled, her presence polished. A husband provided for the household, made decisions, and represented the family in legal and financial matters. He might travel, entertain, or take on responsibilities in politics or business. Emotional intimacy was not guaranteed, nor was companionship. For some couples, life settled into a partnership built more on duty than affection. Others found joy in shared interests, in mutual kindness, in respect. There were moments of tenderness, unexpected laughter, a hand reached across the breakfast table, a glance exchanged at the end of a long evening. But these were often private, not paraded. Divorce, while legally possible after 1857 in England, remained rare and scandalous. The process was expensive, difficult, and almost entirely inaccessible to women unless severe cruelty or abandonment could be proven. Even in cases of deep unhappiness, couples often remained bound by law and expectation. Affairs occurred, sometimes openly. Some wives looked the other way. Others carried their pain quietly, never speaking of it aloud. In novels, love triumphed or fell in tragedy. In ballrooms, it moved behind fans and within the framework of a waltz. But in everyday life, it was more complex. A slow unfolding of two lives shaped by rules, roles, and the subtle dance of mutual observation. The language of love was not grand gestures, but consistency. It was how a man greeted his wife in the morning, how a woman folded her husband's handkerchiefs with care, how two people found time for each other in a world filled with obligation. And while many stories ended in comfort, others drifted into quiet distance. Some marriages became businesslike, others cold. Some grew stronger over time, weathering the years together with patient understanding. And though few spoke openly of dissatisfaction, it echoed in poems, in diaries, in the subtext of novels passed between hands. Beneath all of it lay the desire to be known, not only as a daughter or wife or husband, but as a person. To be chosen not for fortune or reputation or family alliance, but for who one truly was. That longing, though rarely voiced, lived in the hearts of many. It colored the letters that survived, the songs that were sung in private, the portraits that captured more than just a likeness. Romance in the Victorian age did not shine in the open. It flickered, softly, carefully, behind closed doors, between written lines, and in the spaces where words were not required at all. Chapter 12. Superstition and Science. The year turns quietly, as it always does. The trees shed their leaves, the fog lingers longer in the morning, and the fires are lit a little earlier each day. Inside the home, life continues in gentle routine. Letters are written, tea is taken, boots are brushed and placed by the hearth. Yet beneath the familiar rhythm of daily life, something stirs, a growing curiosity, a quiet tension between what was always believed and what is now being discovered. In parlors and drawing rooms, on train platforms and under gas lamps, conversations begin to shift. Where once scripture and superstition guided every thought, a new voice has entered. The voice of reason, of science, of method and measurement. But the old beliefs have not left. They remain, tucked into corners, whispered behind closed doors, carried forward by habit and fear and memory. It is a time when two worlds exist side by side. A lady may carry a Bible in her bag and a pamphlet on phrenology in her coat pocket. A gentleman might consult a doctor in the morning and a spiritual medium in the evening. One does not replace the other. They mingle, often uneasily, but always together. The Victorian world is filled with wonders. Electric light is beginning to replace the flickering gas lamp. Trains move across the countryside faster than any horse could run. Photographs capture the faces of the dead and preserve them on silvered plates. Telegraph wires carry words across continents in a matter of minutes. Machines hum, factories rise, and the shape of daily life is changing. And with each innovation, new questions emerge. What lies beneath the skin? How does memory work? What causes illness, a bad spirit or a bacteria? Where does the soul go after death? The past had answers, clear ones, often shaped by centuries of religious belief, but the new age demands evidence, experimentation, and proof. It asks people to look again, to consider new explanations. For some, this is thrilling. For others, unsettling. The home is a place where this conflict plays out in small ways. A mother, tending to her feverish child, still places a bowl of rosemary by the bed to chase away evil humors, even as she adds drops of laudanum prescribed by the physician. She opens the window to let out the sickness, believing in both air circulation and ancient charms. On her wrist, she may wear a bracelet carved with protective symbols, a gift from her grandmother, passed down with the assurance that it brings luck and wards off misfortune. She does not know if it truly works, but she wears it still. Superstition does not disappear when science arrives. It adapts. It lives in the hesitation before opening an umbrella indoors, in the careful placement of mirrors, in the avoidance of certain dates for weddings or travel, in a small bag of lavender tucked into a child's pocket. Many of these habits go unquestioned. They are part of the fabric of life, held not because they are proven, but because they are known. And yet, in universities and lecture halls, a different kind of knowledge is growing. Doctors speak of anatomy and the circulation of blood. Chemists isolate compounds and test their effects. Astronomers chart the heavens with greater precision than ever before. Naturalists travel the globe, collecting plants, insects, bones, building museums, and rewriting old assumptions. Charles Darwin publishes his theories on evolution, shaking the foundation of beliefs held for generations. His ideas suggest that life developed not through divine design alone, but through slow adaptation over countless years. Some embrace this as truth. Others recoil, fearing what it means for the story of creation. Newspapers print essays on geology, describing layers of the earth older than the Bible suggests. Microscopes reveal invisible worlds, cells dividing, organisms moving in water too small for the eye to see. Each discovery offers clarity, but also raises more questions. The Victorians, ever curious, do not turn away. They build cabinets of curiosity in their homes, filled with shells, fossils, dried plants, and preserved insects. These collections are not mere decorations. They are windows into the structure of life itself. In drawing rooms, conversations turn toward electricity, magnetism, and invisible forces. Some believe these energies may explain not only the workings of machines, but the mysteries of the mind, and perhaps even the presence of spirits. Spiritualism begins to grow. It offers a middle ground between faith and science, the idea that the soul continues, and that communication with the dead is not only possible, but testable. Seances become popular. Candles are lit, hands held, the room quieted. A table may tilt. A message may arrive, spelled out by knocks or through the voice of a medium. Photographs emerge, claiming to capture faint images of the departed, ghostly figures hovering behind the living. Some believe without doubt. Others attend out of curiosity. A few, skeptics from the start, leave unconvinced. But the draw remains strong. Spiritualism speaks to a deep longing, the desire to understand what comes after, to know that death is not the end, to feel that those lost are not truly gone. It offers comfort, even as it invites scrutiny. Scientists begin to investigate these claims, bringing scales, recorders, and notebooks into darkened rooms. They measure temperature changes, examine photographs, test the mediums for deception. Some are revealed to be frauds. Others remain unexplained. Society divides not into believers and non-believers, but into those who seek answers through different kinds of faith. One in reason, one in something older, Even within medicine, the boundary between belief and fact is not always clear. Doctors prescribe both chemical compounds and spiritual rest. Hospitals administer opium and prayers in the same breath. Patients are told to trust in the care of their physician, while also encouraged to confess their sins and make peace with God. The body and soul are not yet separated in treatment. They are seen as intertwined, one affecting the other, one requiring attention as much as the other. For the working class, science brings both hope and hesitation. Public health campaigns promote clean water, proper waste disposal, and vaccination. Cities begin to build sewer systems and regulate food safety. These changes save lives, though often resisted at first. Suspicion runs deep, of doctors who arrive suddenly, of strangers who speak in clinical terms, of treatments that are new and unfamiliar. Folk medicine remains common. Herbal teas, poultices, and charms are passed down through generations. Some work, others offer only comfort. But comfort is its own kind of healing. Even among the wealthy, belief and logic are blended. A woman may attend a scientific lecture on botany in the afternoon, then leave an offering at a loved one's grave by sunset, arranging the flowers with quiet ritual, speaking words meant for ears no longer present. She does not see contradiction. To her, both acts are part of the same search, to understand, to connect, to carry meaning through the unspoken. This balance between superstition and science becomes one of the defining features of the era. The Victorians do not abandon the past as they step into the future. They carry it with them, in pocket watches and prayer books, in telescopes and tea leaves, in anatomy charts and whispered blessings. They live at a crossroads, with one foot in tradition, the other in progress. And though they do not resolve every contradiction, they do not need to. They find space for both. In the end, it is not the precision of instruments or the certainty of rituals that matters most, but the desire to understand the world around them and the courage to look at what cannot yet be explained without turning away. Chapter 13. The Evening Routine. The clock on the mantel strikes 8. A low, bell-like chime rolls softly through the house. In the parlor, a newspaper is folded and set aside. Across the room, an embroidery needle is tucked into the edge of fabric. The light has changed. Outside the tall windows, twilight settles in like a shawl, blue-gray and hushed. Inside, the lamps are lit, one by one, each flame blooming behind frosted glass. Evening has begun. The air carries a stillness now, different from the daytime rhythm. The scurrying of boots and broom bristles has quieted. The footsteps on the stairs grow slower. Conversations drop into whispers. There is no more urgency. The work has been done, or else it waits for tomorrow. The hours ahead belong to a slower kind of time. In the kitchen, the last of the dishes are being dried and stacked. A servant sets down the dishcloth and wipes her hands on her apron. A quiet satisfaction lingers in the air, the kind earned after a long day of careful tasks. The cook has already retired. The pantry is closed, the hearth embers banked. A single candle flickers on the shelf, and the sound of tin lids clicking into place is the only thing that remains. Upstairs, the lady's maid prepares the dressing room. A warm pitcher of water is poured into the basin. Brushes are arranged. A fresh nightgown is laid out across the chair, its hem smoothed. Slippers are placed beside the bed, precisely angled. The fire in the grate is stirred back to life, just enough to chase the chill, not enough to waste the coal. A small bottle of lavender water is uncorked. Its fragrance rises gently and hangs in the air, like memory. In the drawing room, the family gathers. Chairs are pulled closer to the hearth. A tray of biscuits and a pot of tea arrive, not for need, but for comfort. The silver spoons rest lightly against the china. Conversation turns away from business and responsibilities and settles into gentler things, a passage from a book, a memory from childhood, a letter received that morning. The fire snaps softly. Outside, A carriage passes, its wheels muffled on the damp street. For the children, it is nearly bedtime. The nursery glows with a soft lamplight. Toys are placed back into baskets. Tiny socks are pulled from feet, tucked into drawers. A governess reads the final page of a story aloud, slowly, patiently. The child beneath the blanket listens with heavy eyelids, clinging to the rhythm of the words. A kiss is placed on the forehead, the quilt drawn higher, and the door gently closed. In some homes, bedtime comes early. For others, the evening stretches a little longer. The piano may be opened and a quiet piece played. Nothing lively, just something soft, perhaps a lullaby, perhaps a hymn. A daughter plays while her mother listens, the needlework forgotten in her lap. The candles shimmer along the edge of the polished wood. The notes drift up the staircase, settle into corners, and fade into the quiet. Elsewhere, someone writes in a diary. She leans over the desk with care, the nib of her pen scratching across the paper. Her thoughts are measured, not hurried. She writes about the weather, a visitor who stopped by unexpectedly, a thought she had during tea. There is no audience, only the page. The lamp beside her casts a pool of yellow light. The rest of the room fades away. The father finishes a letter by hand, a short note to his brother in the country. He folds the paper neatly, slides it into an envelope, and seals it with wax. The address is written with firm strokes. It will be posted in the morning. For now, he places it near the clock and leans back, resting his hands against the arms of the chair. The ticking is steady. At 9:30, the house begins to loosen. Servants climb the stairs to their quarters. Boots are removed, aprons unfastened. Doors close with quiet clicks. A candle is carried down a narrow corridor. A muffled cough is heard, then silence. The kitchen is dark. The scullery waits. The morning will come soon enough. In the master bedroom, the fire has dimmed to a gentle glow. The lady sits before her mirror as her maid brushes out her hair. Each stroke is slow, rhythmic, comforting. No words are spoken. The mirror reflects the soft light and the soft weariness of the hour. Powder is removed. Pins are set aside. The gown is exchanged for a cotton shift, then a robe. A pair of slippers, wool-lined, replace the boots she wore earlier. Down the hallway, the gentleman sets down his spectacles. His valet folds his waistcoat, places it in the drawer, and lays out his nightshirt. There is no rush. He moves with practiced ease. The collar is unbuttoned, the cuffs unfastened. The day peels away, layer by layer. He steps into the slippers by the bedside and pours a glass of water from the pitcher on the stand. The two will meet briefly in the drawing room once more, perhaps for a final word, a shared glance, or simply to check the locks before retiring. In some homes, a small bell is rung. It signals the end of the day. Curtains are drawn. Candles are snuffed. Chairs are pushed back beneath the table, and the house breathes out. The street outside has fallen into near silence. Only the faint clop of a late cab's horse or the distant echo of a patrolman's whistle breaks the hush. The world has turned inward. Even the city has paused. In the quiet of the bedroom, the rituals continue. Hands are washed in the basin, the towel warmed by the hearth. A few drops of oil are rubbed into dry skin. A brush removes the dust from the jacket to be worn tomorrow. A nightcap is placed on the head, its cotton drawn snug. Books rest on the table, though few pages will be read tonight. The candle is brought close. The bedsheets turned down. A prayer may be whispered, not always aloud. Sometimes only silently, words mouthed without sound, to a God who listens without needing to answer. Sleep is not always immediate. Some stare at the ceiling for a while, their thoughts drifting over the day. A conversation they wish had gone differently, a task they meant to complete, a letter they forgot to send. Others fall into slumber quickly, the weight of the day drawing them down. The fire burns low. A few embers remain. The shadows stretch across the walls and blend into the corners. Somewhere in the house, the grandfather clock marks the hour, then nothing more. only the breathing of those who sleep, only the stillness. The evening routine is not merely a set of actions. It is a gentle farewell to the demands of the day, to the brightness of the sun, to the world outside. It is a slow undoing of formality, a return to self, to warmth, to quiet. In the soft darkness of the Victorian night, beneath layers of quilt and wool, beneath slate roofs and behind heavy curtains, thousands rest in homes both grand and humble. And as the moon rises above the chimneys, casting its pale light across the rooftops, the city becomes a patchwork of sleep. Each window dark, each household still, the world has folded itself inward once more, and waits in silence for the morning to come. Chapter 14. The Unspoken Rules. The drawing room is quiet again. A breeze moves the lace curtain at the window, slow and soundless. On the sideboard, a clock ticks gently, unnoticed by those who live with it. In the upholstered chair near the hearth, a young woman sits with her ankles crossed at just the right angle. Her spine is straight. Her hands rest one atop the other. Her face is calm. She says nothing out of turn. She asks no personal questions. She waits for someone to speak to her before speaking herself. She listens more than she speaks. She is polite, but never too familiar. Warm, but never bold. Curious, but only about things that are proper to ask. She lives within the lines, even when those lines are invisible. In Victorian society, many rules were written. They were printed in guides and manuals: how to introduce oneself, how to host a dinner, how to respond to an invitation. But there were others, unspoken and unwritten, that held equal power. These rules were learned by watching, by being corrected, by feeling very quickly when something was not done as it should be. It began early. Children were taught to sit still, to speak only when spoken to keep their clothes clean and their hands in their laps. They were praised for quietness, obedience, and good posture. A fidget, a question, a laugh too loud could bring a glance from a governess that said enough. Boys were taught confidence, but it had to be quiet. Girls were taught grace, but it had to be effortless. One did not boast. One did not draw attention. Everything was shaped by a desire for order, not just in appearance, but in behavior. You entered a room a certain way. You greeted others according to age and status. You avoided eye contact if it was too bold. You offered a smile, but not too wide. When invited to sit, you did not sink into the chair. You perched. Your hands stayed visible. Your ankles together. Your voice soft. Manners were more than kindness. They were a form of armor, a way to move through a world full of judgment without giving anyone reason to speak ill of you. There were expectations for what to say, and just as many for what not to. You never asked about money, never spoke of illness in detail, never commented on someone's appearance in a way that might embarrass them, whether too flattering or too honest. One did not speak of pregnancy, not directly. One did not mention death at the table. One did not correct others in public. One did not admit to loneliness or disappointment or desire. Grief was allowed, but only quietly. Anger, almost never. Emotions were shown in ways that could be easily excused. A handkerchief held a little longer. A pause before answering. A voice that trembled but was quickly steadied. Even joy had its limits. One must not seem giddy. To be too expressive was to appear unrefined. In every gesture, in every silence, there was meaning. To ask after someone's mother was a kindness. To mention that someone had not been invited to a party was a cruelty. To send a letter without the correct title or seal was to offend, even without intending it. The way you walked, how fast, how loud, said something about your character. The way you stood when others entered the room revealed your understanding of status. The clothes you wore, the books you were seen reading, the way you held your teacup, all of it spoke, even when you did not. And these rules, while invisible, were not optional. They were enforced by glances, by gossip, by the sudden absence of invitations. A woman who laughed too freely might find her name left off the guest list. A man who spoke too familiarly with someone above his station might be told that his presence was not required again. There were those who learned to navigate this maze with ease. They were born into it, trained in it, surrounded by it. But for those outside, new money, foreigners, the ambitious poor, the rules could be a trap. To rise in society required more than wealth. It required knowing how to behave in every moment, how to dress just so, how to speak without error, and one misstep could undo it all. There were guidebooks for this. Dozens. Hundreds. They promised to teach you how to behave like a lady, like a gentleman, like someone who belonged. But even the best of these could not cover everything, because often the most important rules were the ones no one ever said aloud. They were learned only through embarrassment, through silence after a question asked too directly, through laughter that did not include you, through kindness that suddenly grew cold. The unspoken rules did not only govern speech and posture, they shaped the very thoughts people allowed themselves to have. Desire was not something to be indulged, especially for women. Ambition, if it was not directed toward duty or religion, was dangerous. Doubt in religion, in marriage, in one's place, these were not to be voiced, even privately. There were entire categories of human experience that were simply left unnamed. To suffer was common. To speak of suffering, less so. You endured quietly. You prayed. You walked the same path others had walked before you. And if you could not, you pretended that you did. There were, of course, those who rebelled. Writers who used fiction to say what they could not say aloud. Artists who let their brushstrokes break the rules of proportion and respectability. Women who chose not to marry. Men who left England altogether to live as they pleased. But they were exceptions. The structure held. Most people did not break the rules. They bent slightly, here and there. They found ways to express themselves, in poetry, in gardens, in the quiet decoration of a room. They learned how to say one thing and mean another. How to apologize without admitting fault. How to offer criticism through compliment. How to live with longing while smiling. The rules gave safety, but also silence. They created peace, but at the cost of honesty. They protected people from chaos, and from one another. And yet, within these boundaries there was also beauty. Grace, kindness, and generosity all found space to grow. Conversations were thoughtful. Kindness was shown in actions more than words. Respect, once earned, could last a lifetime. There was a language to it, elegant, subtle, and deeply human. Not everyone spoke it fluently. Not everyone wanted to. But for those who did, it shaped the world like a frame around a painting, unseen but impossible to ignore. And so the days passed, shaped by things never said. Chairs were offered, letters were folded, smiles were measured, and lives were lived, quietly, carefully, beneath the weight of the unspoken. Chapter 15. The Final Curtain. The sky outside is quiet, streaked with a pale light that presses gently through the curtains. Inside the house, the day begins slowly, without haste. But something is different. There is no clatter from the kitchen. No voice calling up the stairs. No footsteps moving about with early morning energy. Today, the silence is heavier. In a bedroom upstairs, the mirror is covered with a black cloth. A picture stands untouched. The sheets are still drawn across the bed, and beside it, on a small wooden table, rests a single candle, burned low through the night. Someone has died, and with that, a new set of rituals begins. In Victorian England, death is not hidden away. It is not something to be rushed or forgotten. It is seen. It is touched. It is honored through gestures, symbols, and silence. The moment of death is met not only with sorrow, but with action. A doctor is called to pronounce it. A servant is sent to fetch the carpenter, who will measure the body for a coffin. The family begins preparations, not for burial just yet, but for mourning. The house changes. Curtains are drawn. Clocks are stopped at the hour of death. A black ribbon is tied to the doorknob. Visitors are told with soft voices and lowered eyes. There is no laughter, no music. The world narrows, slows, quiets. The body is washed and dressed, usually by someone who knows the family, a nurse or midwife. The clothing is chosen with care. A favorite garment, perhaps. Something simple. Hands are crossed over the chest. Eyes are gently closed. And for a time, the dead remain at home. Not hidden, not rushed away. They lie in the front parlor or the bedroom, surrounded by flowers, by photographs, by the quiet presence of those who come to pay their respects. This is not morbid. It is comforting, a chance to say goodbye, to sit beside the stillness, to grieve with presence rather than absence. Sometimes a photographer arrives. Post-mortem photography is common in the Victorian era, not out of vanity, but remembrance. A final image, carefully composed. The deceased might be posed in a chair, propped gently, or shown in their bed as if simply resting. In many cases, it is the only photograph the family will ever have. Children are captured with dolls in their arms, grandparents with prayer books in their hands, young women with fresh flowers pinned at the throat. These images are kept in albums, framed on mantels, carried in lockets. To the modern eye, it may seem strange, but to the Victorians, it is a gesture of deep love, a way of holding on when the body can no longer remain. The mourning period begins immediately. It is not only an emotion, it is a structured time marked by visible signs and silent agreements. For women, mourning dress is an elaborate ritual in itself. The first stage, known as deep mourning, requires full black garments, matte, without shine, with minimal adornment. No jewelry, save perhaps for jet or pieces made from the hair of the deceased. A heavy black veil is worn over the face in public. Gloves and bonnets match. This stage may last 6 months, sometimes longer. Then comes second mourning, a slightly relaxed phase with the allowance of silk trim, modest accessories, a touch of ornament. Finally, half mourning, where shades of gray, lavender, and mauve may re-enter the wardrobe. The entire process might span 2 years or more, depending on the closeness of the relationship. Men follow simpler customs. A black armband, a cravat, a dark suit. Their mourning is less about fabric and more about manner, their absence from social events, their quiet withdrawal. Children, too, wear black. Even servants mourn. If the deceased is a member of the household, especially one of prominence, the staff will dress accordingly, their uniforms adjusted, their routines changed. Funerals are formal, structured, and dignified. A black plumed carriage arrives to carry the coffin. Mourners follow on foot or in hired coaches. Men remove their hats as the procession passes. Women bow their heads. Streets may fall silent. The cemetery is not just a place of burial. It is a place of memory. Headstones are chosen with care, engraved with verses, symbols, and carved hands pointing toward heaven. Some are simple. Others tower with angels and draped urns. The wealthiest families erect mausoleums, entire tombs meant to house generations. But even the humblest grave receives flowers. Often graves are visited regularly, tended, spoken to, cleaned. To the Victorians, the dead are not gone. They are simply elsewhere, and the living have a duty to remember them. Mourning becomes its own world. There are guides to how long one must mourn for a spouse, a sibling, a cousin. There are rules about when it is acceptable to attend a dinner party again, when one may remarry, when one may smile in public. These are not cruel restrictions. They are, in many cases, protective, a way to allow space for grief without forcing it into concealment. They offer a map through sorrow, and for many that map is needed. Within the home, memory is preserved through objects. A lock of hair, braided and framed, a brooch filled with ashes, A book left untouched on a shelf. Letters tied with ribbon, stored in drawers that no one opens for years. The dead are not removed from daily life. They remain in portraits, in tokens, in the phrases people still speak aloud. He would have liked this. She used to say that. It smells like his pipe smoke. Children grow up surrounded by these echoes. They learn the names of uncles they never met. They wear rings engraved with initials that are no longer used. They say prayers for souls long departed. And in doing so, they learn that love does not vanish. It changes form. Even in the busiest cities, reminders of death are constant. Black crepe hangs in windows. Obituaries fill the back pages of newspapers. Church bells toll at certain hours, not for time, but for passing. Gravediggers move steadily through their work. Undertakers display samples in shop windows. Coffins of polished wood, lined with velvet, priced by material and size. And above all this, there is an awareness that life is fragile, that illness can come suddenly, that birth and death are neighbors. The Victorians, though often seen as obsessed with death, are in many ways deeply in love with life, precisely because they know how quickly it can end. Their rituals do not dwell in morbidity. They dwell in meaning. They offer dignity. They offer memory. They offer continuity, a way to carry someone forward, even after they are gone. As the house settles again, the final tasks are done. The black ribbon is removed from the door. The last condolence letter is answered. The mourning clothes are folded and stored away, and life resumes, but not unchanged. There is a space where someone once stood, a chair at the table that is not filled, a rhythm that stumbles slightly, still adjusting. But the home continues, because that too is part of mourning. To live, to remember, to speak the names, to find quiet joy again, without guilt. And so the final curtain does not fall in silence. It is drawn with care, held open for a moment longer, and then let go, not to erase what came before, but to gently allow the next scene to begin.